All right, so we today are going to go over the actual elements of screenwriting. Okay, so we're going to start diving into those. And it seems like most of you guys, hey, David, it's good to have you back, my friend. And it seems like most of you guys are pretty familiar. So are you guys all like, you've written screenplays before? You guys can jot it in the chat or whatever, but it seems like a lot of you guys are familiar because of the material that I am seeing. So that is awesome. Where we are going to cover everything. And with me, I really honestly stick to the basics in a lot of things because complexity is really built on simplicity. You know what I mean? We learn our basic ABCs and then we learn our 1, 2, 3s, and then they end up putting the ABCs into math, and that's where you lost me. So I'm done at that point. But with my communication in regards to screenwriting, I honestly believe people get so much information that they get stuck just out of that. I always encourage to continue to learn, but a lot of people I've communicated with and connected with, and they just keep reading more books. Oh, I got this book coming in the mail. Oh, I'm watching these videos. I'm this, and I say, what are you writing? What are you actually working on? You know? And they're like, well, I just need to work on this one point. Well, okay, that's your approach. So you could stick to that if it's getting you the results that you want. So anyway, what you guys have learned up to this point, that's the hard part. You guys have learned the difficult part of actual trying to work on building a good story. Storytelling, that is the difficult part in writing your novel. That is a difficult part in, I don't wonder if that's me. You guys hear that, or is it just me? Okay.
No, we hear it.
Okay. All right. But the difficult part really is in storytelling, not screenwriting. As you're writing your novel, obviously that's a challenge. You know, you have to be really, really, you got to know the rules and stuff regarding grammar and all that kind of stuff. With screenwriting, you could cheat a lot. And I love that about screenwriting because I don't have to focus on so much the grammar, even though you should, absolutely 100%. But sometimes you're not writing complete sentences and you could just say this and say that. And as long as it's making sense in the script, I'm like, woo, rock on. But you guys that are writing your books and novels, you got to look and a lot of different ways of phrasing things, and sometimes that can be a challenge. So, but I love the way that some of the material that I've seen come over is so beautifully written. You know, with writing a screenwriting, just for you guys to know, is a visual art form. Even though you are writing screenwriting, it is a visual art form. So you want to focus on writing visually. So if you have a character that simply walks out of the room, that's fine. You could write that, especially in your first draft. He walks out, but a character is going to walk out a certain way. They're not just going to walk out of a room. They walk out a certain way. So in your first draft, if you just want to indicate that someone is walking out of a room or somebody walks into a room, that's perfectly fine. But you want to let us know how they are walking into that room. But anyway, I'm not even diving into the details right now. We're going to go over the elements of screenwriting. And for you new screenwriters, this is easy. Easy. Don't see it any other way. It is so easy because there's only so many elements in screenwriting. There really is. And once you know those elements and what they are and what you're supposed to do with those elements, then you are 100% golden. So for now, I'm just going to say this. I'm going to right now from this class and depending on time pushing into the next class, we're going to go over the rules and what I call the laws of screenwriting. Okay, the rules and the laws of screenwriting. But here is the beautiful part. The beautiful part is the rules, why you need to learn them, because you will see people all the time saying, well, I don't want to, I'm a creative and I'm limited when I'm having to do this. A lot of time that's an excuse for someone just not to learn a certain art form. They want to cheat. You cannot rewrite how screenplays are done. So let's just establish that. Let's get that out of the way. So you may be the most brilliant screenwriter or novelist. You don't want to try to go in and rewrite the rules because of your brilliance. Okay, that's ignorance. that you're not going to change the industry because you have an amazing script or you're an amazing writer. So here's my recommendation. You learn the rules, learn the laws, and then you choose which ones you want to bend. And you will also know which ones you will never and should never break. Okay. Does that make sense? Really simple. The way that I phrase it for people to understand is simply this. We all, most of us, have our driver's license or at some point had a driver's license. Yes, most of you guys, driver's license. Okay. Now, when you got that driver's license, keep in mind, you studied your little book, you read it up and down, back and forward, so you can go in and take your written test. And then when you passed your written test and you did a little practice, you went and took your behind the wheels test, right? Everybody pretty much had to do that in order to get a license, okay? And so when you were taking your test, guess what you did? You did the very best that you could possibly do to obey the rules and the laws, the rules of the road, did you not? You had your instructor sitting there grading you, and you wanted to make sure that you obeyed all the rules, all the laws. You didn't run through stop signs. You didn't drive in the carpool lane, although you could have because you had somebody there. But you didn't roll through stop signs or stop lights and stop signs. You obeyed. You didn't speed. You obeyed the rules and the laws because that person was sitting right next to you. But my question to you is, how long was it before you started speeding after you got your license? So great question, because you made a conscious decision to say, oh my gosh, I got my license, and you probably went over the speed limit going home. But you didn't do that while you were sitting next to your instructor. You obeyed all the rules and you obeyed all the laws. So my encouragement is you learn the rules and learn the laws of screenwriting, and then you get to decide which ones you want to bend and which ones you should never break. You see? So you may, how many of you guys speed by any chance? You drive faster than the speed limit. Okay. All right. Rock on. So there is a few hands going up. All right. You made a conscious decision to say, I'm gonna go a little faster. And the reason why you did that is because you counted the cost. You said, if I get pulled over, this is what it's going to cost me, but it's worth it for me to make it to where I am faster. How many of you guys ride in the carpool lane when you're by yourself? Now, I may have done it once or twice because the situation, the circumstance dictated that I needed to get somewhere as fast as possible. And in one situation I can think of in particular, that's something that needed to happen. I needed to get somewhere because someone was physically hurt. So I drove in the carpool lane by myself. Guess what happens when you do something like that? It gets easier and easier for you next time to drive in the carpool lane. How many of you guys go run red lights? Nobody want to admit that, because that's a rule that can have catastrophic consequences. Okay, not just for yourself, but other innocent people that are involved. It is a rule that we should not break. We should not run through stoplights. We should not run through stop signs because we can cause an accident. Something catastrophic could happen. Okay, the same thing really applies to your screenwriting. When you learn the laws and the rules of screenwriting, you will learn things that you should not break, that you just simply do not do because it's against the rules. Then you will learn in other areas where you can bend those rules, just like someone who decides that they want to speed to get to somewhere where they want to go, because they are making a conscious choice to do that. And they also counted the cost. They said, well, this is not going to have catastrophic consequences. This is actually going to help me in some areas, blah, 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 whatever reason you came up with, you're going to learn those rules so you can decide which ones to bend and which ones never to break, because you do not want to give your reader a reason not to continue to read your screenplay. Okay. There's certain formatting that a screenplay has to have. And my recommendation for you guys is, even though we're going to go over these elements, and depending on class time, we'll dig into them. I'm going to pull up my final draft on my computer and we'll kind of just actually look at the elements. Right now, we're just going to talk about those things and then dive a little bit deeper next week as we start going into characters and actions and dialogue, because I know some people are struggling with their dialogue and how they phrase things in their actions and stuff. But we're just going to go over the elements of screenwriting, and I'm just going to talk them out first. So you guys just jot down your notes. And the reason why I do things like that, I keep it simple, because remember, complexity is built on simplicity, right? Keep it simple, and then you can build on that if you need more information or you really need to dig in. All right, so we're going to go over those elements. I'll talk them out, and then we'll go into final draft, and then we'll start looking at those elements on paper. All right, so just to let you guys know, there are only roughly about 7 elements to a screenplay. Okay, so just keep that in mind. 7 elements to a screenplay. The hard part was you telling your great story, which is what we're working on right now. Everything that we discussed up to this point was about telling a great story. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your little outline, which is your great story, and we're going to put it into a screenplay. Putting into a screenplay, not difficult, not hard. In fact, to me, it is easy, and to you, it's going to be easy. Now, how you word things once you have those elements in place, how you word things, obviously that will become to some a challenge. You know, we're looking at the best way of phrasing things. But remember, when you're working on your first draft, you just want to get through it. If a person walks into the room, if you're not used to this, you don't have to look for the best way to describe how that person is going to walk into the room when you're first starting out or when you're doing your first draft. Okay, you just want to say they came into the room, they did whatever actions they needed to do, and say they left the room. I don't have to look at the best way to phrase that. I just want to get it again out of my system. They came into the room, they looked for some stuff, they tore the room apart, and they grabbed what they needed and they left the room. That may not be the best way to phrase something in your action lines, but it is a way for you to continue to write without getting stuck, without you sitting there going, dang, how can I best say this? Or how can I best say that? When you're doing your first draft, if it's not coming natural to you, don't worry about it. Just write it down. Exactly what's taking place, just write it down, okay? So we're gonna go over the elements of the screenplay, so just take notes, take them in your own way for you guys to remember these things, okay? So typically when your screenplay opens, and I'm gonna kind of just go in order, a little bit in order as best as I can. So the first thing you start off with is most people, a transition. Okay, so go ahead and write that down. One of the elements of a screenplay, actually, well, let's just go ahead and make a list. I want you guys to write these words down. Transition, that is your first word. The next one is going to be scene heading. Scene heading. And then in parentheses, put slugline, or you could put AKA slugline. Scene heading, slugline, both used interchangeably to represent the same thing. Okay. Next thing you're going to write is action. Action. The next thing you're going to write is character name. Rock on. The next thing you're going to write is dialogue. The next thing you are going to write is parentheticals. 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 All right. Parentheticals.
Trevor, can you say the spelling again? Tell me.
For parenthetical. Okay, it's Parentheticals. Parentheticals. All right, the next thing is extensions. Extension, EXTENSIONS. Extensions. All right. And this is technically part of your scene headings, but you can write either as a different note, or you can write it with your scene headings. You can write subheadings. Okay, whether you want to separate those or whether you want to keep it with your scene headings, write subheadings. Okay. All right. Does everybody got those? Rock on. Fantastic. So we're going to start off with our transitions. Okay. Our transitions, when you open up your screenplay, you're going to start on a blank page. Typically what you see is, well, let me give you the definition of them. A transition is simply this. It's a way of going from one scene to the next scene. And if you're looking for a deeper definition, that's all you're going to get from me. It's a way of going from one scene to the next scene. How does that one scene go to the next scene? That's what transitions are. That's it. That's it. You want me to be deep? I got nothing. Okay. It really is that simple. Okay. Transitions, you will typically find the most common ones we see are fade in, fade out, and cut to. Those are the best examples, the most common, the most popular examples of transitions. And just let me know this, you can get through an entire screenplay without writing any transitions, not one, okay? Because really it is not your job to tell the director how he is going to go from one scene to the next, all right? So you can go through an entire screenplay and technically not have any transitions, all right? The common transition we see is fade in when we open up our screenplay, okay? It is not a rule that you write it. It's not against the rules that you don't write it. It is completely up to you. If you want to start your screenplay off with fade in, that transition, because you're starting off with black and then you're going to open up with something. But guess what? Maybe the director doesn't want to fade in. You see what I'm saying? So you do not have to put that. That's why I said you can technically go through your whole screenplay without writing a transition. The last transition that you will typically see in a screenplay is fade out or fade to black. Fade out or fade to black at the very end of your screenplay. But guess what? You don't have to write that either. You can literally write the end. Ha! Now your transitions are going to be in all caps. Okay? All caps, that's it. Transitions will go, they will move from one scene to the next, and you are telling the audience, or in your case, if you're writing a screenplay, you're writing for a reader, all right? And so you're writing typically what's called a spec script. So you're gonna learn what that is real quick. A spec script versus a shooting script. A spec script is something that you were not hired to do. You're writing it in hopes of getting it sold, getting it into a film festival, getting it made with you and a bunch of friends, or having a production company pick it up. You're writing it on speculation. You're hoping that someone picks up your screenplay. That is a SPEC script, a spec script, all right? When you're writing a spec script, you're writing for a reader, all right? You're writing for a reader. And you want them to have the best possible read of your screenplay, and you want it to flow top to bottom as quickly as possible. People that are reading your screenplay, they don't have time to keep going like this. That's where novels come in. We want to do that when we're reading our novels. Novels are between 80,000 and 100,000, 120,000 words, right? We want to do this because that's a novel we're reading. They're painting the picture in our minds. We're living in a character's minds and seeing their actions, but we're living in that character's mind. In a screenplay, you want to be able to read straight down that page as quickly as possible. So if you have a lot of writing, a lot of black ink on this glorious white page, then you might be a little off. But I will say this, if you read a lot of film festival screenplays, you will see a lot of very, very wordy screenplays. All right. So don't think that you should go in that direction just because you looked up some Nichols screenplays, you looked up some Blacklist screenplays, you found some screenplays online, and there was all this wordiness to them, and you want to emulate that. I encourage you, do not do that. All right. You want to have as few words as possible to cover those blank pages. few words as possible, as few black ink as possible. Now you will see from established writers that they can get as wordy as they want because they've already been proven. They've already established themselves in the writing community, and in the filmmaking community. All right. But for you and I, spec scripts, we want to try to keep our words down to as few as possible and paint that picture so the reader can read straight down the page. All right. So we have our transitions. That's just going from one scene to the next. I don't care what book you read, what video you watch. That's what it does. And it doesn't get any more complicated than that, really. So transitions, we're moving on from that. I will give you an example though. And I will once I get into the fade in too as well. You might see something like dissolve to. That's a blending of scenes. If you want one to fade out as another one is fading in and they're blending over each other, you might see a dissolve, or you might write a dissolve to. But guess what? You're not the ones that going to tell the director how that's going to take place. So you don't really need to put it in there. All right. Now, if you have a certain scene where you have somebody going to sleep and they turn the lights off. Now, whether you want to add this or not, completely up to you. But if they turn the lights off and you say cut to black, all right, kind of makes sense. They're in darkness now. All right. But you don't have to put that either. But if you want to indicate that, that's where you would do that. All caps transitions are in all capital letters with a little colon on the end. And then you write cut to black and that's it. But typically, you do not need to put transitions in your screenplay. All right. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right. So those are our transitions. Now, the next element that you're going to see in your screenplay typically is your scene heading or your slug line. Your scene heading and slug line, they let the reader know where the scene takes place. How deep is that? Want me to go deeper? I'm not, because there's no reason to. All you're doing is letting the reader know this action that's going to be taking place is taking place in this particular setting, and I'm indicating the setting. That is all there is to it. Yes, and I will give you an example for sure. I'm going to tell you guys how to structure your scene headings. But for your definition, your understanding of it, that is all there literally is to it. You are indicating where the scene takes place. Right here, I'm sitting in my room, and I want to let the reader know that I'm sitting in my room. So I'm going to put a scene heading, right, to tell the reader that I'm sitting in my room before I start doing my actions. So I'm going to tell you how to structure that first real quick. Okay. A scene heading consists of 3 things. That's it. 3 things. Whether you're inside or outside. So you can put that as 1. And then in parentheses, if you want, you can put or both. All right. A scene heading consists of 3 things. And the first one is whether you are inside or outside or both. Okay. And I'll give you an example of what or both would mean. Okay. The next element in a scene heading is your physical location. Your location. So just write that word, location. And the last element of your scene heading is time of day. All right. So if I asked you to construct a scene heading, it's simply going to consist of, for inside, we're going to write INT for interior, INT period for interior. And yes, you guys are taking notes, because it's you that's taking the notes. You're going to remember the notes. I could show the slides and then you're going to jot down your notes, but I don't have slides. That's just the way that it is. So INT represents interior. It's an interior shot. All right. INT period. EXT period represents an exterior shot. Exterior shot. EXT period. And if you're doing both, you're going to write I/E period. That's interior and exterior. All right. So let me just break that down real quick. Inside, I'm inside my room right now. So I would write INT period dash bedroom, because that's the next part, location. If I'm outside of my house, I would write EXT period Trevor's house. So that would show the exterior of Trevor's house. All right, an example of when you would use I/E period, which is interior and exterior. Just imagine this. You are sitting behind the driver's seat of a car and somebody's talking to you outside your driver's side window. So you got the window rolled down and you're having a conversation with somebody that's standing outside of your window. You guys can all picture this. You're writers, right? You can all picture that piece of cake. So now we have I/E. If we want it to, we're indicating to the director with that, obviously, but we're saying we're going to film inside the car, maybe shots of me. And then from the outside of the car, we're going to film shots of the person that I'm talking to. So in that same scene, we're going to be shooting from inside the car and we're going to be shooting from outside the car. That's an I/E period scene. All right. Now, of course, if you're not wanting the camera to go to the outside of the car, and this is one of the few places where you're basically indicating that the camera, it can, is going from inside to outside, then you just leave it interior and you can have your shots of just you, or exterior if it's shots from outside the car, you know what I'm saying? But in that sense, in that instance, I would use I/E period because I'm wanting the camera to go back from inside the car to also shooting outside the car in the same scene. All right, everybody got that? Anybody have any questions on that? All right.
Yeah, I do. Sorry.
Go for it, Jay.
Yeah. Do you know, with the scene heading now, would we need to write INT, and then would it be like Jade's house, then the bedroom, and then time of day, or can I leave the Jade's house out and just put bedroom?
When you establish your location, then you can just put bedroom. When you establish yes, you establish the location first, typically. Okay.
Thank you.
Unless that's the only bedroom you're going to, you see what I mean? Because you can keep saying bedroom, and next thing you know, the person that's breaking down your script has a problem because there's 4 scenes that says bedroom, and one is your bedroom, the other is somebody else's bedroom, and the other is somebody else's bedroom. So you have to establish that location first, and then you can just go bedroom.
Right, thank you.
All right, does that answer your question okay?
Yeah, that's brilliant, thank you.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so we have our inside or outside or both. / location, physical location of where we are. And so just like Jade was asking, if I wanted to do it this way, I would go INT period Trevor's house / bedroom dash, I'm sorry, dash, not slash, dash. We'll see it in a second. Dash time of day. So for my particular location right now, INT period Trevor's house. If I did not establish my location yet, Trevor's house dash bedroom dash time of day. Okay. Or it would be just INT period Trevor's, or just bedroom dash day. So it's that, just think about this. You're going to go inside or outside or both, your location. And then if you need to break that location down into more detail, then it would be that location as well. So it's a location, bedroom. So Trevor's house, bedroom, and I can even go closet if I wanted to, right? Maybe somebody's hiding in the closet, go come get me right now as soon as this Zoom session's off, or pelt me over the head right now on Zoom. Man, wouldn't that make a story? I got mugged on TV, not on TV, but you know what I'm saying, okay? So I could do that. So you're going to hone in that location. Trevor's house, bedroom, closet, if somebody's hiding in the closet, and time of day. But your scene headings, your slug lines consist of just those 3 elements, okay? But typically, once you establish your location, then you can go interior, exterior, and we're going to talk about the subheadings in just a second. But interior or exterior or both, location, time of day. It's really all those elements, okay, and only those elements, and they are indicating where the action is going to take place. All right, there's nothing more deep about that. I will tell you the rules that govern that. If your location changes, then your scene heading has to change. If the time of day changes, then your scene heading has to change. All right? Those scene headings are for that moment. Hours later, your scene heading has to change. If I switch to another location, your scene heading has to change. And scene headings are written in all caps.
I have a question.
Yes, go for it, John Mark.
Sometimes you'll see people add the scene number. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead. Or is that it?
No, that's it. Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. People that add scene numbers, they have what's called a locked script, okay? And which means the script is done. They're going into production if their screen is locked, their script is locked, and they have scene numbers to indicate what scene they're either going to be working on, and it does go in chronological order, but those don't go in your spec script. They will not go in your spec script. Those go into shooting scripts. All right. If you're writing a spec script, there's a lot of elements that actually just do not belong. All right. Because you're writing for a reader to get interested in your story, not in the mechanics of, you know, the different elements. So see, your scene numbers are for shooting scripts when they're ready to go into production. Otherwise, it's not locked, which means they're going to make their changes. Because once you lock a script and you're making changes, now you're going to have to reprint copies. Your scenes are going to start, you're going to be adding scenes like 1A. So instead of scene being scene 1, if you make changes or you add anything, it's now 1A, 1B, 1C. The colors of your papers begin to change, you see, and those are all in shooting scripts. Those are an element that we're not even working with, but scene numbers are in shooting scripts and not spec scripts.
But how do we connect? How do we know from one scene to another without mentioning the scene number?
The scene numbers don't matter in a spec script at all.
How do you differentiate between scene 1 and scene 2? Like,
you don't.
Nothing. Oh.
No, you don't. You're just reading. You're just reading. That's it.
When you're doing transitions, also you just write fade in, fade out, and stuff like that. Even when you're doing transitions.
When you're doing transitions, and I'm going to answer your question, but don't let me forget to talk about cut 2, please. But in your spec script, you don't indicate any scene numbers at all. You're just reading. Okay. And I don't necessarily have a reason for that other than you're just going to, obviously in a novel, you have your page numbers that you can look to and say, oh man, I left off at page 12. Okay. In a spec script, you just have your page number. That's it. So you can say I left off at page 12, I left off at page 16, but you're not going to have scene numbers at all. And that's 100% a rule. Okay, so that's a law. That's a rule. You don't put scene numbers in your spec script. Scene numbers are for shooting scripts. That's it. That's a rule. If you start adding things to your spec script, they're going to know that or kind of indicate that you may not know what you're doing. All right. They just don't belong in there. As a matter of fact, just go ahead and pull up. Well, you can't really pull up a lot of people's spec scripts because they shouldn't be online because otherwise somebody might, whatever. But yes, they're just not in there. If you need to find a certain scene, you just go to your page number.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now cut 2. Forgot to add that.
Yes.
Thank you. And Amanda, did you have a question?
Yes. What about if I have a scene where I have a few moments later, something is happening?
Then you could write that. Literally, you can write that, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that because that's the last part of our scene headings. But I did want to mention this in regards to transitions. My encouragement: you can do what you want to do, do not write cut to at the end of each scene. You will see it in some people's scripts. They'll go their first scene, they'll write the slug line, their action lines. They want to go to the next scene, so they write cut to. Then they write the next scene heading, their actions, and they write cut to, and then cut to, and then cut to. Do not do that. Don't do that. It just takes up space, and it's absolutely 100% not necessary, because your reader 100% guaranteed is going to assume that if they're going from one scene to the next scene without there being a scene heading, or I'm sorry, a transition, it's a straight cut, because that's what you most see in a film. Just a straight cut. You're going from one location to the next, nothing in between. Sometimes you'll see it fade to black. Sometimes you might see it fade to white. Director's decision. That's where the director comes in and he says, this is how I want to best tell this. All right. I had made a mention in the Legacy Street Writers group when I responded to Sophia's question. And I said, well, sometimes you would put, you know, cut to black. If you knock somebody out and you write cut to black because you want to indicate that, that's, you know, that's something that I would consider acceptable in screenwriting. You knock somebody out, lights out, cut to black, and then you open up into the next scene. All right. That makes sense. Somebody gets shanked in prison, you know, and then they go to heaven. Well, okay, yeah, they go to heaven, or they die and you want bright lights. You know, I saw a bright light. Man, that was a train, bro. No, I'm just playing. But bright light, and you want to say fade to white as a transition. You could write fade to white. You know, you want to represent. Or if a train is coming, right, Sally? If a train's coming and you go, this fool about to get hit, fade to white, and then whatever. So you can write that because it can paint a picture for the reader, but those transitions are not necessary. All right. But what I wanted to address was the whole cut to thing. Don't write them in your screenplay. It's just going to add pages, unnecessary pages to your script that shouldn't. Sally, go ahead.
I've been having internet issues, so I don't know if you got my question on the chat and answered it or not. But I have an idea to do a scene where, you know, it's like a morning scene where mom's waking up kids and she's going from room with a laundry basket to room to room to room to room. Technically, they're different scenes. So how do you slugline that? Because I'd struggle with that, because I'm like, was it a track? Did interior?
Hey.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to go different places in the house.
Get your ass up and yeah.
Gotcha.
Get your ass up. It's time to go. You're going to be late, you know, like a typical, you know, morning routine.
Perfect.
But
Perfect. I got you, Sally. That's where your subheadings come in. Okay.
Okay.
So once you establish your location, and I'll get to you 1 second, John Mark, but once you establish your location, say interior, Sally's house, and you're running around through the house, once you establish that location, the next location, because we're still at one spot, the next location could be Johnny's bedroom. That's it. Or just bedroom. The next location in all caps could just say bathroom. The next location could just say laundry room. The next location could just say kitchen.
How does that look? I don't think I've seen a subheading, or
Yes.
I've not recognized it when I've read a screenplay, because I just see slug lines.
Yes, that's 100%. This is one. If I'm going to tell you something, it's 100% something you can stand on. If I had some, maybe I'll pull up some screenplays, or you guys should be looking and reading screenplays, but you said you haven't found any. So I'm going to look for one and find you one, but 100%, this is factual. Once you establish your location, if I'm here in my house, you're there in your house. Once we establish that location, we don't have to go interior, Sally's house, bedroom, day, interiors, Sally's house, kitchen, day, interior. You don't, or continuous even. You don't have to do any of those things. Okay, just establish your location. And if you're going to go in 5 or 6 different spots in your room, right? Or in your house, you go garage. That's it. All caps. Kitchen, all caps. bathroom, all caps, laundry room, all caps. 100%, you could stand on it, bank it. If it's not true, you owe me money.
No, I believe you.
No, I'm just playing.
But like
just
when,
playing.
but I wanted to kind of make it so that there's a cut when she goes into the garage. Because then I want to kind of mark the scene. So to track from her bedroom with a laundry basket going through each room to the kitchen, and then the door to the garage is closed, and I want to make that its own scene. So do I say, is that a new slug line? Or because I want to make it so that when she kind of like, before she opens the garage, because she knows she has to have a tough conversation. So I kind of want her to pause before she opens that door. So like that would be a new slug line. Like touch the doorknob, start to turn, and then it's a new slug line for interior garage. Or is that exterior?
Well, it could be, but it really depends on how you want to write it. Because if you're writing that in your action lines, which what we'll talk about next, but in your action lines, if you're wanting to write the pause and all that kind of stuff, then you're going to just end up in the garage, right? Because that's where you're going.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she starts in the bedroom to wake up the kids, and just like, a mom or dad picks up the laundry basket. It's like, get your ass up. You're late. You've got to get to here. You got to get your breakfast. Bus is going to come, whatever. And then the girl's not in her room. She's in the garage because that's this habit she's developed. And mom dreads it because she's like, how do I handle this? And she takes a pause before she opens the door. So it's, bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, garage.
Right.
So it's like a track.
I totally see the picture. I totally see that. And your dramatic pause, really is going to come, in my opinion, it's going to come from your action lines, what you're writing in there. I get that. But I'm like, is the slug line starting in its, interior day, Sally's house, bedroom, then bathroom, then Sissy's bedroom, then Lou's bedroom, then kitchen, then there's this giant pregnant pause. I gotta go and deal with. But that's all it is. That's not even that's barely even a moments later. But see, this is where you get to make your artistic decision, to be honest, because I guess
I'll just figure it out and I'll send it to you.
You can do that. But I can already tell you, me writing that scene, I wouldn't make it look any different than the other parts, because I don't see why there should be a difference. Because I would write it in my action about how this woman's feeling, how she's dreading grabbing that door handle and going into the garage. I just don't see it any different. And continuity for me, because I'm like crazy about that, continuity for me, I would wonder, why is it like this, that, whatever, and all of a sudden now we're interior Sally's house, garage, whatever.
I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe it might work. I mean, how you're wanting to do it, but you could do it either way.
So I could probably put parentheses like once she gets to the door to like pause, then garage.
Or you could write it in the action that she is freaking out about having to go into that garage. That really is the action right before that next step takes place. You see?
Right. Okay.
That's
So she
action.
do like
that's action.
So you can write close up, with like anxious face.
Nope.
Goes into no.
Nope.
Okay, I'll just figure it out and then I'll send it. I'll copyright.
Say her face is twisting and whatever she's feeling, and you could say, her hand slowly see, this is where you get to direct the camera. You don't get to do the cut, close-ups. You don't get to do any of that stuff. Anything that you want to indicate where you want the director, or you see what I mean? Because really you're writing for the reader, but any area where you think this is a camera shot, you can phrase it in a way that lets the reader and also the director know this should be a close-up. This should be a pause. This should be something that should be emphasized. You do that in your action lines. Okay.
Okay. Okay. I got you.
yeah.
I got you. Okay.
Yes. So we'll get
okay.
you. We'll
that
get you
makes me.
dialed
That
in.
makes. Yeah, that makes me feel better. Right? That clears it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You
cool.
rock. We'll get you dialed in on that, Sally. Go ahead, John Mark.
My question was just, since this is spec scripts, it seems like then no point of view or over shoulder kind of things.
No, that's correct. Okay. That's correct. But the beauty of it, John Mark, and for all of you guys, the beauty is wherever you can see that camera focused on something you want to focus on, you can absolutely write it that way. That's where the beauty comes in with your writing. I tell my camera, no, I'm just saying, no, I really do. If I want to emphasize something, it's game on. And I will write it in a way where the reader and the director cannot see it any other way, except for focusing on that hand, Sally, that's slowly reaching for the door. You see what I mean? So if you're saying a hand is reaching for the door slowly, then that's telling me a hand is slowly reaching for the doorknob. Yeah. And so that automatically is, since you're writing visually, that reader's going to think about that.
I don't necessarily, it doesn't really have to be the hand. It just has to show like she has
I was just giving an example.
No. I'm just saying like, I don't want to do that because it's a bad thing to do the POV or the, close up or anything, but there's sometimes when it's really important. And in this, I want to add in the subtext of, oh my God, I have to talk to this kid and have this hard conversation and I don't know how to do it. But I can't, there's no dialogue, obviously, and there's no real action other than, mom has to look like a stress case. And like, why do I hate being a mom right now?
Right. That is all honestly, all in your actions. If you even wanted to do a moments later, you could certainly do that if you would like. Okay. All right. So rock on.
Okay, thanks.
So does anybody have any questions on what we've covered so far?
So I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, sir. Supposedly there is a scene. Okay, it shows time lapse, maybe for a few weeks or few months. Okay, a guy and a girl in different spaces. They're texting. Okay, we are showing that they are texting or communicating for each other for a long time, for weeks or months. So I show a scene in fast cuts that the guy is in his room. I show the time lapse by showing his clothes are changed. He's sitting in different spaces in his room. So how do I write that? I am confused. Like, because you said that the slug line should change whenever there is a change in location and even in time.
Yes.
So the time is changing, right? So I'm a bit confused that how should I write?
Gotcha. No worries. We'll get you dialed in. I'm going to just give you a quick answer, and then we can hang out. If you're able to hang out after 8 o'clock, I'm going to answer it in more in depth. But something like, just from what I'm hearing that you're wanting to do, that would be a montage. You can do a montage and you could show the changes of clothes. You could show the texting, because once you say montage, once you start a montage, you can put whatever scenes you're wanting to indicate, however you want to indicate them. Some people will bullet point them, you know what I mean? And then just say, because essentially you're just saying these scenes are going to happen in this montage. And some people will go so far as to say these scenes will happen quickly, you know what I mean? These scenes will happen quickly, and they'll go bullet point, boys texting girl in one set of clothes, and then bullet point, this happened on the other end, bullet point this, and they'll indicate everything that they're wanting to see happen during that montage, and then you just go in montage. But so that's what I see as far as that time lapse that is happening. If somebody's looking at a calendar, if there's a calendar or whatever, and we show, and we have a shot of that calendar, because you could certainly write it. You're not going to tell the camera to look at it, but you could just say, the camera, not the camera, but you can write your scene where you could see the date that's on there, or if there's something that indicates a date, or if it's on your phone or something like that, it'll have the date on there. You go through the time lapse, and then at the very last time lapse, we see that it's 4 weeks later on there. That's a way that you could do it without trying to tell anybody that it's even having to indicate it that it's 4 weeks, because if they're smart, I like writing smart, then I saw the date when the time lapse started, and then I saw the date when the time lapse ended. And then once I do in montage, all those scenes are grouped together. A montage is something that happens within a few moments. You know what I mean? It shouldn't even very go. You can clean an entire house in 20 seconds, you know, because you don't want to spend 2.5, 3 hours of your film with somebody cleaning the house. So you do a montage. The kitchen gets scrubbed, you know, the bathroom gets scrubbed, the bedroom gets made up. All these different things happen within 10 or 20 seconds. You see, so that's all taking place. It's really no different than you having a 4-week type of montage, but it really comes down to the individuality of your particular screenplay. But we could talk more in depth about that in just a few minutes if you can hang out.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. So just so I can finish up the scene headings, and we also now got into the subheadings. Okay, but scene headings, interior, exterior, or both, and you know in what instance you would use both. All right. The location, the physical location, and the time of day. That's all there is to a scene heading. It just lets the reader know where the action is taking place. All right. This is where you can, because remember, we change our scene headings if we're at a different point in time, or if the actual location changes. If we are still in the main location, we just touched on it already with the subheadings. That's where your subheadings would come in. It is perfectly thumbs up, acceptable. You're not breaking any rules. It actually makes for a better read. Is if you're already inside the house, I'm just indicating kitchen, all caps. That's going to be my scene heading because that's my subheading. Living room, all caps, bedroom, all caps, and we're good to go. If we switch up our location, then we will go interior, exterior, wherever location we are, and time of day. Okay, now in regards to time of day, for the most part, you typically are only going to write day and night. All right, unless the time matters, or if it's morning and they're cooking breakfast, it's logical to put morning. But in most screenplays, all you're going to see is day or night, because it really is just going to indicate to the director. And even though you're not writing to the director, it's really going to indicate to them whether it's a night shot or a day shot, you know? So day or night is typical. If it's specific to a certain time, if it is morning time, you can go ahead and put morning. But for the most part in your screenplays, you're going to have day and night. If the sunset's important because you have a romantic scene, then yes, put sunset. If the sunrise is important because you have a, you know, romantic scene, I don't know, stupid, then put sunrise. You know, if it is important. If it's not, and it doesn't matter, it's day or night. Day or night. Let me hear you in the day, or that's it. All right. So day or night. So that's it, guys. Day or night, unless it matters. You can also put a specific time. If somebody's waking up at 3:30 in the morning, you know, and they're slapping that alarm clock, you can put literally 3:30 a.m. Okay. If the time matters. If it doesn't, it's morning. Okay. If you want to do a night scene, there's day, night, evening, you know, but typically it's just day or night, one or the other, unless it matters to your scene that it's different. If people are having breakfast, then go ahead and put morning. You know what I mean? But if it's just the start of the day and they're going about their day, it's day. Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Mine actually, I am trying to, you know, it starts off in Mexico, then they fly east. So I'm like early afternoon or morning, this thing happened. Now it's early afternoon, the plane flight back east to DC. Then we have, you know, like I'm trying to consider the reality of it. How would this work? You know, we're going to fly on a plane. It was morning. Now it's early evening. Now they're having her flashbacks, her dreams and whatever. Now we've got the evening. We have multiple things happening later that evening. But, you know, to actually like create a timeline that actually could work in real life. I've been trying, you know, do flights even leave early and from the east to the west, you know?
Well, those are great questions to ask as far as the flight times and stuff, but don't get too caught up in day or night. Let me hear you say day or night.
Okay.
Honestly, because you're writing for the reader and they want to have a straight read down the page. If it makes sense and there's a specific reason why it's early evening, you know what I mean? If it's dark, you know, what's that?
I said, because they're on the plane. Now it's late afternoon, early evening. Now it's later that evening. Now it's night. You know,
day or night. Let me hear you say day or night. They want to read straight down the page. If it's dark, it's night. You know what I mean? If it's dark, and it doesn't matter if it's later, but we don't need to even have a reason for it being later. If they start off at the airplane or started off and they arrived at the airport and it's early evening, and then they're at their hotel room, for example, and it's like now evening, does any of that stuff even matter at that point in your scene, in your screenplay? Does it does it even matter to your screenplay? You know what I mean?
Really.
You see what I'm saying? Because if it doesn't, day or night. Let me hear you say day or night. Really? So unless it's something that is specific, it's not about even, you want to make a clear read, right? The early evening, if it's not really relevant, I understand you're trying to make it realistic, but as far as the reader's concerned and as far as the director's concerned, he just wants to know, is it a day shoot or a night shoot?
Okay.
So we can dig a little bit into the specifics of your story. But does anybody have any questions on that? The scene heading. That just lets us know where the scene's taking place. That's all there is to that, right? And it has those three elements. Okay, so since we're on here, no, let me just cover the foundational stuff. The next part is your action line, your action. Your action line indicates what is happening in the scene. That's it. That's where you introduce your characters. That's where you have them walking down the street. That's where people get into a fight. That's where, you know, the bank tellers are doing their thing and the grocery clerks are doing their thing. This is where you indicate and paint the picture of what is taking place in that scene that is indicated by the scene heading right above it. Okay. We'll do the whole final draft thing next week and we'll start really digging into details. I want you just to get the basic foundation of these elements and how easy they are. They really are that easy. Okay, but this is where, like, if I was going to introduce myself in the action. So I start off with my scene heading, interior, bedroom, day. It's morning right now. Don't care. I could put day unless the morning is specific. If I'm having breakfast, put morning. You know what I mean? That's fine. Any of that stuff is fine. But day or night is what you're going to consistently see through people's screenplays. Unless there's a reason for the sunrise and the sunset and something takes place at a specific time, then you can certainly indicate that. See, so I'm giving you permission. Just know, perfectly okay for you to indicate a specific time of day or a specific portion of the day, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, night, or whatever. It's perfectly fine to put those things. But what you're typically going to see is just day or night, unless there's a reason why it can't just be that. Does that make sense? So just stick to the basics unless there's a reason. Remember, you're writing for clarity. If you want to clarify something, make it easy for the reader to read down that page, then you put what's necessary to put in there. Otherwise, it is absolutely just not necessary. Okay. So I have my scene headings, interior, bedroom, day. That's where I am right now. Trevor sits talking at his computer on a Zoom session. That's it. That's the action that's taking place right now. You see? Now, if I want to get more detailed, obviously I can write all that. When you're going through your first draft, just write what it is that you are seeing. Just get through it. Don't try to look for the best ways. The more you do this, the more screenplays you write, you will kind of write what needs to go there and how it needs to go there. And then you might go back to polish it up later on. Okay. But for the most part, just say what happens. That's it, guys. Just say what happens. get it out of your system, because you know now it's in writing, it's on paper, that works. I don't have to find that perfect word to describe anything at this point. If my wife comes in, she's in the other room, but if my wife comes in and then she walks back out, I can put my wife walks in, my wife walks back out. She grabs something and walks back out. That's it. All right. In that particular, because I wasn't wanting to go into detail just yet. If anybody has to go, just thank you. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your time. I'm going to just continue going over this because people can always watch the live sessions. I'm sorry, the replays. And then I will show you this in final draft next week. Okay. And that's where you get to actually see what it looks like on paper if you're not familiar with it. Okay. But as far as the action line, that's it. Showing what happens in the scene. I'm just going to throw this little tidbit at you, right? Don't want to get too crazy in your scene description, in your action lines. All right. So you can write action. You can also put in parentheses scene description because you're describing what takes place in the scene. Scene description, action, scene description. Those two words are used interchangeably for that particular portion. You're just letting the reader know what's taking place. Obviously, no dialogue goes there. We'll go further in the detail next week. I'm just wanting you guys to see the elements. Okay, the next element is your character name. Anybody take a guess at what character name represents? Your character name's going to go there. Nothing creative about it. There's nothing creative about the things that I'm already indicated. Transition, nothing creative about it. It's just how one scene is going to go to the next, and most of the time it's going to be a straight cut. Your scene headings, I already told you, those three elements, right? Subheadings, you're just breaking it down. We already established our location. Now we're just going to just say, this is where I'm meeting in that location. You could do that in the same area if you're in a big room. If you're in a big old room and you want to indicate, you know, some people, you will find this in scripts where they're wanting to focus on certain elements of a certain room. Say you're in a, where was I just at? One of those, not crafts, but they're antiques, you know, like these antique barn things, you know, and they have different areas where people can sell their antiques and stuff. You know, if there was one particular place where they're selling a certain thing over here, or like in a flea market or something like that, and you're like in the vegetable area, you know what I mean? Or in the tools area or whatever, you can do that as well in using subheadings. I established that I'm at the flea market. Now I want to go where they're selling the fruits and vegetables. I'm a farmer's market, whatever, but fruits and vegetables over here, I could just put that in there. They're selling tools over here. If that's an area here, electronics are over here. You can do that in a big old store. Think about the Walmarts, think about the Targets, think about whatever store is big with you guys. You can use those subheadings to indicate that once you establish your location. There's nothing created about this. This is just the mechanics. So easy, okay? And then you get into your action and your scene description. That's describing what is taking place in the scene. We'll get more into detail and give you guys the finer goods on that in our next session when I pull up final draft. Okay, the next area is character name. This is simply where you're going to put your character's name. Nothing creative about it. It sits right there in the middle of the page along with your dialogue. Character name, boom, right? Nothing creative. The next element, and there are little elements that we can add to the character name, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm just going to keep going. Dialogue. Dialogue are just the words that you speak. Yes. There's nothing I can really add to that, you guys. And you can learn about dialogue, and we'll dig into dialogue a little bit more. We'll dig into the action, so how we can best describe things a little bit when we start looking at the actual final draft. But dialogue sits right there in the middle of the page, and it's only this little section right there in the middle of the page. And because the reader wants to reach straight down, who's talking? What are they saying? Who's talking? What are they saying? Who's talking? So they get to read that straight down the middle of the page. Okay. So you have your character name, then you have what it is that the character is saying, their dialogue. All right. Simple as that. Okay. One of the last elements, or these are little sub elements, you guys. In regards to your dialogue, there is a thing called parentheticals. If it's unclear, notice what I'm saying. If it's unclear how a certain line needs to be said, then you can indicate that in parentheticals. So you would have your character name in parentheses is your parenthetical, which is going to tell the reader and the actor how a certain line is going or needs to be said. Notice what I said, if things are unclear, because they're very rarely used. You don't want to use them often because if you're an actor, you don't want to be told how you say something. You want to feel that, you want to live that, you know, that type of deal. Okay, you can get on somebody's bad side real quick if you keep putting a bunch of parentheticals. And if you have to keep putting a bunch of parentheticals to indicate how something is needs to be said, your writing is not very clear. All right. So here's an example of a good use of parentheticals. If somebody is bored out of their mind, and you could see it in the action because it's already been described in the action or whatever. Actually, that we should know that from the action. But if they're bored out of their mind and somebody else comes up to them and they're partying it up and they got their drink in this hand and they got something in this hand or whatever, they're like, man, this is awesome. Aren't you having a great time? And the person says, man, this is cool. I'm doing awesome. This is so much fun. Okay, I'll just make it easy. This is so much fun. I'm having a great time. But they really are bored out of their mind. You're saying something that is contradictory to what your actions are saying. You see, and so the actor clearly would know from what you're describing how it's supposed to be, but this gives clarity and it makes it for an easier read. If you're saying something contrary to maybe your actions is when you use parentheticals. Okay, and that's a really simple example, but it should be a good example that you can make sense out of. Have you been somewhere where you didn't want to be and somebody's just like, man, this is awesome? Or that you like to, how do you like my painting? And you're like, dude, this rocks. It's so awesome. You know what I mean? And that's what you're saying, but your actions are saying otherwise, or you're wanting to contradict and do a different action, or you want to say something differently than how it's written. Okay, then you would use your parentheticals. Parentheticals are also used to indicate who you're talking to if you're in a group setting. All right. So if it's not assumed because you're having this back and forth conversation, if there's 5 people that are standing there and you want to talk to somebody who hasn't been talked to yet, you would indicate in your parenthetical to character number 3, to this character. All right. Does that make sense? Because you could just say something, hey, how's it going? Well, you could be talking to the group, but if you're wanting to talk to someone specifically in that group, then you would use parentheticals to indicate that. Does anybody have any questions on that? Parentheticals, if you're saying something contrary to an action, or if there is some clarity that needs to be made in regards to how a line should be delivered, do it in parentheticals. To indicate who you're talking to, if you are in a group and you want to talk to one particular person, to that person, to Tommy, to Johnny, to Susie, to Larry, to whoever. All right. If you want to indicate specifically who you're talking to. Parentheticals also can be used for this. If somebody says, what do you think about that over there? And you don't know what the person's talking about, obviously, because if you're in a room, what do you think about that? And it wasn't something you were talking about before, you can write REF semicolon, whatever it is that you're referencing. So when they say that line, it's in referencing, if we're in an art gallery, let's just say that. What do you think about that? Reference to the painting, reference to the statue. So those are 3 examples of parentheticals.
Can we say reaching for his hand?
You can do that. You can use action, but typically, and I'm telling you, this is the goods here. Typically, if you can take that action and put it in the action line, you want to use it there. If you got this big speech thing going on, then it's even better to break that little speech up by saying reaching for this or whatever, instead, because it's going to break up the monotony. You don't want to have these big old, we're going to get into dialogue later, but you don't want to have these big old long things of dialogue. You got to break those things up with action. something that is visual, because remember, film is a movie, not a talkie. You have your people that write amazing dialogue and they kill it, and they can write for days and do these long monologues. But even so, they're still going to have actions in between to break up the monotony of that, of like cutaway type deals, to break up the monotony of just this person talking. So yes, you can absolutely do that, reaching for this. But see, that's an action that you literally can put in your action description. You see, and if you're doing a long type of monologue type thing, it would be good for you to do that, because you break up that monologue and you break up that long dialogue with an action, something that you're showing visually besides just the person talking. So yes, you can absolutely use the parentheticals for doing something in the midst of this person talking, but just see also if you can just put your action line in there. And then when you go back to that person's dialogue, it's going to say continued. So you're going to continue your speech, and action, continued, and action, continue your dialogue, and action, continue your dialogue. So you have to always use your parentheticals for an action.
Okay, and I had a big speech, and the character who's speaking would do the hand motion or do the toast, which I did as an action. But then when I put his name again, it didn't say continue like it usually would on final draft. So
Right.
what was going on with that? What did I do something different in hitting things? Because I mean, he was the last person talking.
And no one else talked before that person?
No, and this happened 3 times. It only seemed to do continued on the next page. Like that's where they put the word continue. I'm like, what's happening?
And you're in final draft, you're using final draft?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
gotcha. Then we'll have to just talk about that in a minute, because that's really specific. That's really specific, because if you have a character talking, you know, Johnny talks, action, and Johnny talks again, it should have continued. But that sounds like it might just be a setting in final draft that you don't have checked.
Okay,
or
it had been doing it and then it wasn't. So I thought
automatically it should do that. And typically, if you have final draft or another screenwriting software, if you're having communication between 2 characters, it's going to bounce. It's automatically going to bounce back and forth between
the
those
other
2
name.
characters, you know. And if it's not doing that, then it might be a setting under your preferences, you know. So yeah, you'll just have to check that. So we have parentheticals, really easy. All right. And then the last other part is just an addition onto the character name. That's the voiceover, V period, O period. Your off screen, O period, S period. And your off camera, O period, C period. Okay. So if you wanted a character that was talking off screen, their character name would appear, and in parentheses, it would say O period, S period. That means somebody's getting yelled at. I mean, that's off camera, sorry. So off screen is if I'm talking to you, well, I'm talking to you guys, I can see you on screen. If I'm talking on the telephone, dang. All right. If I'm talking on the telephone to somebody and I'm hearing their voice, that character name is going to be in there, followed by parentheses, O period, S period, to show they are off screen, but I'm hearing that character and their dialogue. All right. If someone is in the room or yelling at me from another room, then they are off camera. They're capable of being on camera, but they're not. If somebody's right there, my wife's right there, and she's saying something to me, but I want the camera to stay on me, okay, then her dialogue would be off camera, because she's in the setting where she can be on camera, but the camera's still focused on me, but I'm hearing her voice. All right. The voiceover is as simply as this. An actor is breaking the 4th wall if he wants to talk directly to the audience. You know, when they look into the camera and then they start talking directly, you know, or they're just talking in their heads, you know. So take that back as far as looking at the camera, but they're just talking in their heads, but they're talking to the audience, telling you what's going on. The audience, that could be used as voiceover. Okay, they're talking to you. Or voiceover could be where the story, some things about the story are being told to the audience, okay, through a voiceover, through a narrator. All right. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? Because that's all the elements right there. Shots, are typically parts of a screenplay, but not a spec script. You don't put camera angles in there. You don't put close-ups, medium shots, wide shots. The most I've ever seen anybody do in a spec script is typically establishing shot, but that's even not necessary because you're not writing for a director. You're writing for a reader. You see, you're writing for somebody to read your screenplay as straightforward down the page as possible without getting junked up by anything that's absolutely unnecessary. Okay. So, but shots are part of your screenplay, but not in a spec script. All right. Does anybody have any of those questions on any of those elements, on the definition of any of them? So if I asked you what those things are, you would be able to tell me what those things are. And if you can't, throw it back at me so that you can walk away with some clarity. Okay. So you guys are all good. Put a thumbs up or something like that, because you're telling me yes. And you guys that are muted, just if you're able to hit that little symbol just to say, you guys are good. You have no questions on any of those elements, because that is all there is to it. Thank you, you guys. I appreciate that. That is all there is to it. There's nothing more to it in writing a screenplay. That's why I say the mechanics of writing a screenplay is easy. It's easy because you have the mechanics right there. As far as the placement on the page, if you're not writing in a screenwriting software, find a template. You can find templates for Microsoft Word. So you're not having to go and look up, oh, it needs to be 2 inches on this side, 2 inches, 1.5 inches from the top, and this needs to be that. Don't want to get caught up in that. But if you don't have any of that stuff, I don't care, write it by hand. Don't even think about the placement, just write the stuff by hand. And then when you get your software or get a template, then you can go and type it in its proper format. But don't get hung up in the side margins or where this thing is supposed to sit and all that kind of stuff, okay? Because the screenwriting software or even templates that you can get with your Microsoft will have it already lined up for you. Here's the best test for that. Your screenplay needs to look at like the other screenplays that have been written that you like. Find a screenplay that you like. I could send you guys a bunch if you guys want. Screenplays that have won the Nichols. I have last year's all their winners, or it might have been the year before. Doesn't matter. Good screenwriting is good screenwriting. But I could send you guys all a folder with all those screenplays in it, from the blacklist, all those screenplays in it, because they are available online. So I'm not violating anybody's rights. As a matter of fact, they're available at Nichols and the blacklist. But to make it easy, if you guys want those, but read a bunch of screenplays. And when you look at a page on a screenplay, just make sure yours looks like that. Okay. Not the really wordy ones. Trust me on this. Not the really wordy ones. Those people won a film festival competition, but maybe if you sent it to a production company or an agent or manager, maybe they say, I'm not going to read this. All right, rock on. You know, so they might say, I'm not going to read this. You got to leave. All right, bye, John Martin. And so everybody's clear. Everybody's good on those elements. That's all there is to it. So no complications. Now you're going to take the outline, and some people would write a treatment or a synopsis. They'll write a treatment or an actual outline to the cards once they have their story outlined. Okay. At this point, I don't. I did that in the beginning when I first started screenwriting because I thought it was something that you had to do. And so maybe it helped me, maybe not. But I really, really enjoy just looking at my first card and then diving into that card, seeing that scene on that one card, and then just typing it right into my my screenwriting software. Okay, that's what I do. So I go right from my cards into writing my script. Okay, that's for me. But so nobody has any questions on those elements. That is wonderful. We'll actually look at them in use in final draft next week. I'll just type up some stuff and then you guys can ask your questions. I'll just throw this out there for now. For you guys that have asked, you know, where do you put your flashbacks? Where do you put your dream sequences? You would put those in your sluglines. Okay. Now I read my book. I had wrote a book 10 or 11 years ago. And so how I did mine in the past is I wrote, before I put my slug line, I would write dream sequence or flashback and just underline it. And then I would continue on with my slug line. My problem with that, and that's perfectly acceptable, okay? My problem with that is I like uniformity. I like things looking the same, and it bugs me when they don't. So if all my scene headings are not lining up and they don't look the same, I have a problem with that. So I started doing mine on the end. I write my scene heading, and then in parentheses after, you know, the time of day, those 3 elements, right? Inside, outside, location, time of day. After that, in the parentheses, I would write flashback. Okay. Then I would write, just like I was writing any other scene that I was doing, I would write the actions that are taking place. And then once I'm ready to go back to the present scene, then I would write in flashback in all caps. That's it. Or return to scene, or return to sequence, or return to scene. But return to scene, and that ends my flashback, and I'm done. See, there's nothing even complicated about that. It's simple. All this stuff is simple. The hard part and the challenging part is writing a great story. Okay, now you're going to take that great outline and that great story, and you're going to put it into these easy elements because they're already established. And you don't break these things, you guys. Where you bend and break rules is like in your scene description when you want to get a little bit more flowery. Okay, that's where you can bend rules. Some people that like to indicate in all caps sounds that happen, or want to indicate their props, right? You'll see in my screenplay, I have those. But here's the thing. I've produced all my screenplays. My screenplays have all been produced. So I wrote them for a specific reason, telling our props department, telling these are the props that we're going to need in here. When you're writing your spec script, you don't need to highlight those things. You don't need to highlight sounds, because think about this. There is no sound department. There is no props department. There is no camera. There's none of that stuff. Right now, when you're starting, it's just your story. And that's all you're wanting people to get into, your story, because that's going to take you to the next level, your story. So we'll get further into that next week. So does anybody have any questions? I appreciate you guys hanging on as long as you have.